He's a principal UX designer at Salesforce, and I think he's spent more than 15 years in organizations across Microsoft and Flipkart. Okay, yes. And we have, along with Gaurav, we have Shalini, who is the co-founder at Three Big Things. They are a behavioral design studio. What they generally do is solve large, complex organizational challenges. She's also led design teams at Cisco, Salesforce, and many others. One of the things that we chat about a lot is her passion for handicraft and Indian aesthetics. She carries a diploma in Indian aesthetics. So welcome, Shalini. We also have Anthony, who is the founder and chief creative director at Lopez Design, an award-winning brand strategy firm. And his work has touched actually millions of us, whether it's VIP or Muruga Group or Ayushman Bharat and many more such projects. So welcome, Anthony. We have Purnima. Purnima is somebody I know from long time back, and she's the founder of Arwani Art Project, a muralist. She's also a community artist and an illustrator. I have deep respect for the amount of work, the kind of work that you've been doing. So thank you for joining us on the panel, Purnima. So to start today's panel, I want to start with something very simple, something that we all should talk about. This forum is actually quite apt for it. And I want to open it to all of you guys. Why is inclusive design important? And if there is a story in each of your journeys that you would like to share from that perspective, that will be great. So maybe, I don't know, Gaurav, do you want to start?
Want to start with me? I thought we'll go alphabetically. First thing first, it's great to be here, like the whole vibe, amount of people. Wish we had more people here, but it's a very important topic. I'm a product designer. A few years back, I remember this person asked me, or told me in fact, like either you are from design school or you're not from design school. Interesting, I'm not from design school. I'm a BCA, and I've been pretending to be a product designer for almost 20 years now. Started with smaller companies, and over the years, I've been privileged to work with different types of companies. I work with companies like Microsoft and Salesforce, where we really talk about accessibility. We talk about trust part, or what products we are building. But I worked with very smaller companies also, where I had to fight with product designers to pick the right shade of gray. Like 15 shades of gray, everybody had their own shade of gray. Had to tell them that this is not the right gray. It lacks contrast, shouldn't never use it, but they loved it. So there are always these kind of biases, and it's always a fight what we keep doing. And over the years, I've learned, right, a lot of these experiences comes from your own experience. I mean, I remember taking my mother-in-law to hospital, and I will not just talk about accessibility or product design because that's what we keep doing. But she wasn't well, I was taking her to hospital, and we had to use ramps. And once you drag a person on a wheelchair on a ramp, you know how important it is to have the right ramp. And I've been to my brother-in-law's place. They are an apartment. I mean, there are ramps available. I'm pretty sure it was some professional with right amount of knowledge. They built those ramps. But it is so hard to drag my kid's stroller on that. It makes me wonder what we are doing, why we are thinking as an afterthought. Why inclusivity? Why making things accessible for these users? Why it's an afterthought? Why it's just a tick box? And that's where I think it is very important to understand the journey, the conscious decisions what we are taking as designers. I mean, I was making fun about, like me being a Bollywood movie buff, talking about Rockstar movie, where the girl tells Ranbir to bugger off. Like, I don't even eat burger. Because you don't understand what it is, you have your own mindset and you have your own version of what inclusivity is, what accessibility is, why does it should matter. And it's a good topic for all of us, and would love to hear from the other panelists.
Lovely. Shalini, would you like to add? Okay, go for it.
I've never thought of it. I mean, I've been always called for inclusivity as a topic. And I think, obviously, for me, it's been more than a topic. My work since a decade has only been fair and fully inclusive in many ways. And not because I wanted it to be, not because it was a tick box, not because of any reason, because it's supposed to be that way. it shouldn't be a topic. It's supposed to be inclusive from before, but now it's become a fad, unfortunately. We were always supposed to include everybody in our work, but we've chosen to suddenly make it male, female it became, so now it's become queer or LGBTQ plus. Next, I don't know what not. Obviously, people with disability and all of that. For me, yeah, I mean, my experience goes a long way back in 2009, after shooting a documentary which had featured people from the transgender community. I disliked the documentary, I disliked the process. We only took, we never gave back, and I felt at least my responsibilities was to give it back some way, and the only way I knew was art. And I founded Aravani Art Project, and we have about 35 transgender women working with us, and they're all otherwise into begging and sex work. So that is, for me, currently that is inclusion.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you, lovely stories. So I think having heard what I've heard so far, right now for me it's just about asking the right questions. I think we were having a warm-up conversation and somebody said inclusivity is about including everybody's needs. And like you said, it's absolutely true that this was a basic expectation and now it's become a thing that we have to explicitly do. You know, it's like doctor, when we think of a doctor or a lawyer or a engineer, the image that comes to mind is of a male doctor, a male, you know, engineer or a male lawyer. And now we have to qualify it with a gender before. And I was just reading some interesting literature on how the power of language actually is embedded in your head as influencing your ability to be inclusive in all walks of life, right? And that cultural language aspect, maybe as we lose, my question is, how much can you design in English? How inclusive can your design be if you're designing only in English as a language? So I think during the course of this conversation, I'll probably take that a little forward. That's going to be my probing question, not just to myself, but to all of you as well, saying if we are stuck in that language alone, what are we missing out on, right? So that's just a question I'll leave you with. I don't have a definition. And a slightly unrelated experience that I want to share is about our perspective of what it means to be inclusive, especially in the tech world, since we are in a Women in Tech conference. I was working with Salesforce, and one of our clients wanted to introduce kiosks in rural bike showrooms as a way of disbursing loans to farmers. Okay, and if you can imagine, you know, a kiosk in a tier 2, tier 3 town in a showroom that is probably the only bike showroom for the 50, 60 villages around, you're operating in an environment where people are used to going to a money lender. They take money in cash. You have a yellow card. The money lender has a yellow card. Each time you pay an EMI, there's a physical punch on the card. Now with that level of trust and tactile relationship around money, do you really expect a farmer who's semi-literate to walk up to a kiosk and, you know, punch on the kiosk and say, acha, you know, there's going to be a kaching SMS on my phone and that means the loan has been disbursed and now I can take my bike and go. So there was absolutely no inclusivity in that sense of the mental models of somebody who's different from you. So I think that's the other dimension our conversation can take, is that how present are you to those that are different from you on any dimension? And you have to be present to the dimensions, and then you will be present to the differences. So those are two things that we can look at, right? What are the dimensions on which people can be different, and then what are those differences? So that's probably some stuff that we'll explore today.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Anthony, over to you.
Thank you, and wonderful stories. I'm always lost at words when it comes to a topic like this. I think it's a topic which people inherently understand, but it's very difficult to put into action. I'm a guy, so I come from a perspective. I come from a perspective which is extremely hard-coded. Right? So it's very difficult for me to step out from who I am in reality. So half of it is pretentiousness, and the other half is as a designer, working hard to make sure that I can think in context to other people. So this is just purely at a very broad level of how we apply ourselves as people who try and solve problems. Most problems, basically for me, are extremely complex problems when you're dealing with people, right? So, and to navigate that complexity and then come out with solutions which eventually talk to an individual like you were talking about, requires thinking which is very different from the way we've been taught to think. So that's one thing. Because the whole thinking process, again, historically speaking, is a top-down approach. So how it actually fulfills the needs of a few to be able to then the rest of the people delivering those needs, right? And so that's one thing. And then how the economic model also is developed in context to how the economic, political, everything. All models have been developed on top-down attitude. It's never bottom-up, right? And there are lots and lots of attempts have been made in that direction of bottoms up, but it is always fizzled out because people on top are very, very powerful. And they are interested in holding that power, right, in that sense. So now the question is, how do you solve for such things? And most of us, I mean, most of you work for organizations and you're somewhere in the middle or somewhere in the top middle, but you're never on the top. So first of all, I feel that that how do people who are conscious about this in very fine ways get agency? How do you get agency? Who will give you the authority to speak in that context, right? Where you say, okay, profit is important. One of the girls mentioned profit. Huh? And yet basically you serve, right? So we are in the business of serving at the end of the day. Somebody is paying somebody money and you ought to be delivering the worth in that sense, right? So I think it's unanswered. My childhood, from the time I was being born and the color I was born with and all those things have shaped me. I had 9 aunties whom I had to chaperone in a marketplace. So I've grown up and so my life has sort of fine-tuned me to who I am. The education of design, I said, is a wonderful field. It sensitizes you to the highest level, according to me. It really sensitizes. So what you make of it with that sensitivity is very important. And somehow we lose ourselves in the bargain because other things come in the way towards basically, delivering to that sensitivity in that sense. So I think I can, and since I've got the grayest hair among all of you, I can just keep on speaking, right, on subjects like this.
Yeah, I think you all sort of touched upon one simple aspect, and there's a little story from us as well. We were working on a project which was supposed to be enforced in villages in Maharashtra, and this was an on-ground project, and it was a very small thing which we really didn't think about. We sent out forms for farmers to fill, and we sent them on WhatsApp, and what came back were voice notes, which was a big part of our learning, where we realized that this was our bias, that we think that this is how they will function. So there were 2 lenses that we looked at. They had adopted a technology which we did not adopt. They were very, very ahead of that. And second, we thought that they will be very comfortable reading and writing in the farms. So I want to move to the topic of bias. Each one of you would have, at least in some form, seen bias, whether in your teams or while executing a project. And how do you tackle that bias? How do you build empathy within yourself and within the teams that you work with? So, I don't know, maybe we start with you, Anthony. Why not? We change it up.
Anybody wants to go first?
Or anybody else who wants to go, why not? Please.
I think I spoke about it briefly from my position as a man, right? So, but also, again, I think it's about us putting on the creative hat or the solve hat, right? So we are supposed to solve and we are supposed to be creative. And there's the I factor which comes into it. So I need to have some I, the me in it, in that perspective. So I think these are things which are, which for me are challenges as people who are trying to solve for other people, right? So, so that's my first issue of bias. So I cannot get out of my bias is my first premise. The other thing is that who am I to design for a farmer in Andhra Pradesh of that village in context to his world as an ecosystem is very, very far and misplaced as far as I'm concerned, you know. So I'm nowhere close to his world in any perspective. So that's the biggest challenge for me, to how do you design for the last mile or the last person in the last mile, right, in that sense. And we had a little session and we're saying, it's possible today. So that's the optimism which we need to move forward, because it's not, while the powers are very strong, which is leading to hopelessness and everything what we see around us, but there are equal and opposite powers developing, and they've always been there, which are keeping the world in a stable place, right? So, and I think our awareness and our conversations and our attempts in this direction will lead to good results, I think, yeah.
Thank you for that.
I think I want to talk about the dimension of language that brings its inherent bias, like I started with, right? Again, my question is going to be, how will you be present to another person's point of view, even to get to the last mile? Language is one access that you have to their world, to their culture. And when we as privileged urban, professionals think in a certain way, we probably don't even have the vocabulary for some of the experiences that people we are designing for will have. I'll take a simple example of a Tamil word called masakai. Okay, it means the cravings of a pregnant woman. And unless you know those nuances and those words, even if you're going to design public policy for an Anganwadi, or you're designing some kind of rural healthcare, product, what dimensions are you missing when you don't speak that language, right? Another word could be timuru, which is, it's the word for entitlement or being aggressive, right? And you don't even realize that when you go as somebody who's out there to solve somebody else's problem, you inherently bring timuru into the equation. Who are you to think that you can solve their problem, right? And what are those elements of language that have been eroded, like you said, in the lives that we lead? Maybe looking back in languages that you're not comfortable in thinking in will make you sensitize yourself to those dimensions of culture and other people's experiences, human experiences, that you might not have thought of. So for me, those words that are probably forgotten or not familiar to you, used in a very specific cultural context, can bring back that sensitization and say, is that something that I can use to make myself aware of a bias that I didn't know I had? And if you continue thinking in your mainstream social, cultural, economic, privileged life, you probably won't even know what those things are. So probably actively going and looking for them has been the experience for me when I discover a new word or a new practice. And I'm like, ooh, that's disgusting. But then I'm like, why? It's, it's my perspective, my upbringing, my point of view that makes it, disgusting or inspiring or whatever else. So how can we use language and cultural markers to sensitize ourselves to the biases that we have is, again, a prompt or a question that I'll leave you with.
I think for me, it was just a revelation that I happened to experience maybe a very small fraction of what, the community was going through, the people from the trans community. Because I think we've we're kind of blinded to it. We are aware that they exist, but we are blinded to their existence. So it's very weird, and I'm not able to, I still don't understand how and why we are doing that as a society. And of course, because I've been working so closely with them, I'm so biased by everything that, comes my way in terms of what is sometimes insensitive or is sometimes ignorant. And some days I have to tell myself that be patient and answer these questions, because not everybody knows about them. And sometimes I'm like, that's really stupid question. That if people come up and ask me, how do they live? What am I supposed to answer? I'm like, how do you live? You breathe, you eat, you do your business, and that's the same. I'm just like taken aback by the kind of ignorance people have in general. Like, for another human being. They're not animals, nor are they from another planet. So I think I have taken a step back in terms of making it a point to educate people, because we are in a tech conference. It's enough tech for people to learn, type, and understand what it means to be a transgender person, or talk to them. That's the basic, right? Like, somebody came and told us, no matter how much AI we are all part of, nothing like painting a canvas.
Beautiful.
Right? So I think it starts with just a conversation instead of ignoring. You don't have to pay money to the people who come and ask you, but you can offer them a smile and say you don't have the money, instead of being scared of another human being. So I think, as basic as it gets, it felt like that is something that needed some addressing in general, not just here, but in general.
Can I just build off of that?
course.
I was reminded of the word Aravanai Art Project, right? It's again a Tamil word. And when we use the local cultural terms for transgender folks, I feel that inherently transgender is almost clinical, whereas Aravanai actually has mythology associated with it. There is a temple, there is a story, there is almost a celestial experience that transgender people who identify as Aravanai associate themselves with. And all of those dimensions are completely missing and almost abstracted out when you use a generic clinical term like transgender, right? So again, for me, it's about when you say, what do they live like? Ask, what are their stories? What's the cultural context in which they come from? Why the word Aravanai? Why the word Hijra, right? Those non-English terms that have strong cultural references actually make you connect far deeper, than just saying, oh, I'm gonna Google transgender. No, Google Aravanai and then find out what happens, right? You'll go down a rabbit hole and probably educate yourself far more than just a public policy or a government point of view on what it is like to live life as a transgender person. And if you don't know their stories, their mythology, you really don't know anything about them.
I have a follow-up on this. Is educating about inclusion an individual prerogative, or is it something that the society and people have to really push? And I understand what you mean, Purnima, because you talked about how much should I educate, and sometimes it must be frustrating. So what do you think is the right way to go?
I think
of course, why?
an individual makes the society. So, and everybody says focus on yourself, and everybody else around you will be happy if you are happy. And if you are educated, everybody else around you might be initiate that as well. Like, even to start the project, it was not my goal to change the rest of the world's perspective about the trans people. It's still not. It's a byproduct of what I want to do. But it's not, my only goal is not to create awareness. That's not what it is. I want them to have an enjoyment, them to have a space in art, them to have a voice to express. That has more focus than creating awareness. That becomes a byproduct. But yes, I think if it was important for me to start the project, it was important for me to first educate my parents, my first circle of friends, or anybody else, family, and then move on to the rest of the world. Because if I don't get their support and their, how do I say, their ignorance will also be weird. Because if my dad comes and says, why are you working with them? While I'm educating the rest of the world, that's weird for me. Yeah. I have to educate my dad and make sure he uses the right terms, make sure he's okay with everything. Then I move to the next step. And I think it works well that way, because you're also taking the responsibility of your own family. You don't have to do that for the rest of the world at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Gaurav?
Like, how do I top all of that? But typically, when you think about product design, right, it's, I just gave example about personal experiences. If you think about RAM, or you had your experience, how you start thinking about RAMs very differently, or the color aspect of it. How long ago, when you were filling up a form online, you had male and female as the only gender? That is the product design. That's the form what we used to design. We were all doing that. How long ago it was that, or it's still a thing. Like, when I go through people's portfolio or interviews or what they build, the user personas are always male and female. So these biases are already there. In fact, yeah, where I come, I'm from, and my journey to be a product designer, a lot of biases over the years. I had to learn and unlearn a lot of stuff, and that's very, very important. Inclusivity or making things inclusive, accessible, it's a conscious decision. You might have all the knowledge, you might know how to build a ramp, you have done the entire thing, but if you still build based on because it's a tick mark, that's an afterthought is something what you need to do, or need to really think about. Since we're talking about biases in our own bit, so many organizations I've been part of, they never thought about really accessibility or usability lab where I can actually test with real life users, invite users who are from different backgrounds, test with them. We don't do that. You build a product with certain assumption, you follow features because you want to build a feature fast so that you are in front of the herd. That always happens. Not many organizations, thankfully I'm part of the organization right now and I've been part of different organizations where it is extremely important, not just because of what it will bring and the lawsuits part of it, but Salesforce, the core value is accessibility and trust, right? Equality and trust. So when you say, oh, this is my core value, that means I'm very conscious about it. So it is a conscious thing. Not many of the organizations do that. And as designers, we all have this ethical responsibility to be user first. The whole user-centered design process we keep talking about, user personas, think about them as job performers, what they'll be doing, what the background they are from. Start really taking this as ethical responsibility, and then only you will start making the right step. It's a journey. An end goal is something which it should be inclusive, it should be accessible, but you need to start taking the right step.
Yeah, of course. While we were working on this piece, we actually spoke to Madhvi, who is the part of the transgender community, and she was telling us that the smallest of things, when she works for an organization which is fairly forward-looking, but when she wanted to make sure that she has a drop-down as how she identifies as a gender, something as simple as that the bank did not allow her to put anything but a Mr. or Mrs. or Miss. And that was a small thing, but it's a trigger. And for an individual like that trigger actually is a big trigger because they have got this for a very long time. I want to just sort of go to a tangent from here. Is inclusivity and accessibility the same thing for you guys? What are your thoughts? What is inclusivity? What is accessibility? How are they different?
Wow, that's a tough one.
Okay, Gaurav, if you go ahead. You want to start, Shalini? Go ahead.
No, Gaurav has
All of us, yeah. So when you're including everybody, people from different background, when you're saying it's accessibility is like, in terms of product design, we talk about accessibility as very, very clear thing. We talk about contrast, so we talk about, whether when you're using a screen reader, whether you're able to hear that. Somebody who is from a different background or with certain disability, I can't hear. When you think about product design, how a particular product somebody would be using. So you thought about these things, like it needs to be accessible. But when you're saying inclusivity, you're not thinking about, that's my definition, I could be completely wrong, and I'm still learning, guys. But when you think about inclusivity, you're not thinking about just a particular set of users, who your end users are. You're actually including or designing for everybody. Some of it could be right practices, right? Something very simple as dark patterns. I know all those things that, hey, if you're unsubscribing my newsletter, you're going to miss out all the fun and all that. Now, imagine somebody who has a decision fatigue. You're not including them in this design. We can keep talking about dark patterns, dark UX patterns are bad, but are you including those users who might have a decision fatigue? Or I can say, okay, this is a form, there are going to be a lot of fields. I will not even say Hick's law, too many choices, makes user confused. Think about somebody who has ADHD or somebody who has dyslexia. You're not thinking about just a certain set of user who are going to be using this, but you're now making it equal and making a digital world which is equitable for all the entire world. So that's my understanding of what inclusivity and accessibility is, and that's why they're completely different.
Thank you. I think, Shalini, you had something to say?
No, I actually was collecting my thoughts. I was going to ask.
Okay, Anthony.
You to go first.
Oh, that's because I smiled.
I know. And I thought that was a very telling smile.
No, I think one reflects on it. If you want to be, like in context to what he was saying, that if you want to be truly inclusive, you need to provide accessibility at the highest level, right? So, again, I think all these things, the terms are, again, from a definition perspective, very bracketed in terms of what they ought to be doing. But if you want to be true to somebody in terms of I need to communicate it to you, then I need to take everything of who you are into consideration to be able to do that effectively, right? So, and that is where the challenge lies, to be fully inclusive, right? So, while accessibility is again like the way we see accessibility in terms of ramps for people, who are on wheelchairs, is about giving them access to from point A to point B. But there are many other barriers which everybody faces, right? So I also think that how we solve for that is again a designer's thing. We need to carry that in you. There's never a brief which is given to you. So, an example that we were talking about the Central Vista project. So we did a wayfinding signage for the mother of all wayfinding projects in context to Central Vista, right? So which is the main road which takes you to the Parliament and the Rajya Sabha and which is the place which is right in front, the President's house, right? In that sense, the other one, the Gateway of India. So that's very, very populated in terms of people from all over the country come there, and we were said basically that we need to give symbols to the toilets, and I said, what about people who belong to the other communities, and how do we make them inclusive into the whole thing? And we never asked the client the question. The client never gave us the mandate to do it. We just went ahead and designed an inclusive symbol, right? So which took care of the entire LGBTQ++. So basically that, and then we realized that such a symbol doesn't exist. All the symbols in the world, and we checked out, to our knowledge, were all pretentious. They were either making fun of these people or biased or limited to the definition of what people want to be connected to, as far as those individuals are concerned. So, and then we said that no, but the world requires a new symbol, because symbols are based on the past. The water symbol is something which everybody recognizes, Bund, So that's why you put it there and everybody gets it. I said, here, nobody's going to get it because it's just an emerging thing that we are acknowledging somebody who's different, right, in that sense, or want to be known as different, right? So, and thereby we came with a symbol. They said, okay, coming out of the new symbol, now educating everybody becomes a huge thing. So the best thing is for us to make sure that, so advocacy job comes onto us, our shoulder. We're saying, hey, if you put it on one project, can we put it on 100 projects? Can we make the whole of India do it? And then can India proudly say that we are the first people as a nation, as culturally accepting, have done this for us, for the world, right? And then the world adopts it, right? And then it becomes a policy and things like that. So I think, especially tech people, I feel that you all are in a very powerful position to infuse. It's never a mandate given by the top. But you could do tiny little things which will make all the difference. And nobody need not know about it. And when the emergence happens, that time you can talk about it. See, this is what happened. So that's where the opportunity lies, I think. So from being truly inclusive.
So provocative design. Yeah.
And it's invisible until...
Yeah, it's largely it's about how we see us as agents, right, of change.
Thank you so much. I think that's
I
something
love
to think about.
Yeah, I love that you were okay with it being invisible until people actually were comfortable with it. I think that dimension of inclusivity as a mindset I think accessibility is a response to that mindset, right? I think just cultivating that mindset of inclusivity and saying, you know, earlier we did a workshop, Small Town Folk and Three Big Things, and it was about what if women designed the world. And one of the topics that came up there was what is atypical. So there were atypical symptoms of heart attack. And atypical symptoms of heart attack are what? What women experience as symptoms of heart attack were defined as atypical. So, you know, so questioning the very definition of atypical, like we did in this example that Anthony shared about how is it that everybody apart from men and women are considered quote unquote atypical, and then we have to design a logo or an icon for them, then has to break the barrier of becoming atypical and actually become something that's invisible, recognized, and common parlance, right? I think that transition or that mindset of inclusivity is something that is so intangible. I don't know how we are actually going to get around to it, but I feel like it is, you're connecting to what Purnima said about, did I get the name right?
Sorry,
No. So, going back to what Purnima said about first I have to change myself, I think there's this whole Andapinda Brahmanda concept, right? Like the microcosm and the macrocosm. So where are you like presenting yourself to the what you call quote unquote atypical, and therefore keep building your own definition of inclusivity, because there's no such thing as universal inclusivity. It's only as far as your awareness or your knowledge goes. And I think that's where the challenge lies, is in saying, you know, my organization, my family, my own awareness, where am I pushing the limits of atypical? And I think that is a constant exercise to kind of push the boundaries of what you call inclusivity. Because you might still be a complete, pardon my French, a-hole to somebody, because your definition of inclusivity, you might think you're like absolutely fantastic and very, very inclusive, but because of the lack of your knowledge or your awareness, you might have excluded somebody and you will end up being a villain in that situation. So the only solution here is to just keep building your awareness both on the inside and the outside, and keep doing it as an ongoing process. I don't see any way out of it.
Yep.
And be ready to be caught out and be told that you're wrong and be told that, you know, you're not inclusive. I think that would be the only way to keep learning, is to keep hitting the barrier where you say, okay, I'm no longer inclusive, I need to do something more.
Yeah. And I think as designers and technologists here, like what Anthony said, we have to be consistently sensitive about new things and educate ourselves. So that's an opportunity to everybody who's young here, trying to build, right? I think, Purnima, do you want to add anything to this?
Actually, most of the points have been covered. I was more on the lines of inclusivity is in my head like not a destination, but if it is a point that you need to reach, then accessibility is the way to reach there. Yes. And it has several ways of being accessible, but the inclusion is one, the feeling is one. And inclusion refers to so many different communities that are everything except us, privileged, with all body parts, with all genders in place, everything. But so you can imagine how many layers of accessibility is required and how many different paths one has to take to reach one small portion of what inclusion otherwise is a very large world, which we are all part of. We don't realize that we are part of it unless it happens to us. When we are treated differently is when we feel like, okay, why should I be treated differently? And you will find means to make other people accessible to you. And yeah, it's a journey. I think for me, it's because I come from a cis, obviously I'm a cis woman and I come from a privileged background, but for me to unlearn these things and work on ground with the team had a very different set of unlearning to do. It was just not unlearning. I think I just hate people after some time. For a while, there was a big chunk of years where I didn't talk to anybody because I was just irritated with everyone and their ignorance and the fact that they were not understanding their privileges. But I've somehow come to a middle term of not being so vengeful all the time. I can't live like that. So yeah, I've seen both sides. I've seen bad people in the trans community as well. It's not like they don't exist. So yeah, I think only when you get that overall perspective, you realize people in general, we should stay away from.
I think I'll have to do a tangential conversation here. But how do you top this?
How do you top that? Don't top it.
But yeah, I think just to sort of end this conversation, I want to actually ask everyone, how can we make it possible at scale? How can inclusivity be possible at scale? If any of you have done something at scale, any examples on that?
So, not something I've done. I'm going to give a really short example. And I think inclusivity at scale is possible if we are able to, in this material world, put like an economic tag on inclusivity as a philosophy and the solutions that come out of it. I think one more example that we discussed in our workshop this morning was about how in a Scandinavian country, snow clearing, okay, of the roads, which benefited women more than men. The idea that you could clear snow where women were driving more as opposed to where men were driving more, reduced the number of women who got admitted into hospitals with snow accidents, okay? And that actually impacted the municipal corporation's budget, health budget significantly because there were less people admitting themselves in the emergency room. So if you can put a label on what was otherwise blind to gender or blind to any kind of lack of inclusivity, if you're able to access, like, you know, causes where you stop looking, like that result is also where you stop looking. So how far can you go and say, because of this, these are the benefits, both intended and unintended? And I think that selling of those both intended and unintended benefits of inclusivity is the only way to actually get the powers that be that Anthony keeps talking about. The people who are in power want to stay in power, and the only way for them to stay in power is to show them profit. So, you know, find ways to show the profit dimension of inclusivity, and then I think, you know, half your problem is solved.
Wonderful. I think, Gaurav, you have something. Purnima, you have. Yeah, go ahead.
Like, I'll talk within my own expertise. Like, when we build design system, if you build accessibility within that, if you're using certain components, when you have made accessibility as a check part of your process in the beginning and not at the end, not when it is done, that's where I think you do it at scale. And because we talked about the business aspect or the people who are in the power, there are a lot of benefits. I mean, we need to keep talking about those examples. Think about Netflix, think about Prime Video. My daughter loves Japanese TV shows. She reads subtitles. I mean, I'm not talking about me, I can only hear subtitles. But she reads subtitles, she has already been using a lot of word. Imagine a product like Netflix, they're building closed caption or like these caption subtitles as part of the videos, people are using that. That as part of the product have opened up their product to so many different markets and not just to a typical or a small region. So you need to start thinking about that. When you start thinking about, hey, if my product is being used across different regions, if there is a language translation, how the label is going to get translated. So what is the right size should be. These things need to start happening from the beginning. And when you do that, you're actually building accessible products at scale. I mean, again, talking within my expertise, but a lot of good examples already.
Wow, lovely.
I don't know about topping it all, but I will take this privilege to tell that we painted at the Venice Biennale this year, which was a very big deal for us. After 8 years of existing and creating a visual language for ourselves and a space for ourselves in the art world, in the so-called art world, and being in the best Biennale possible without anybody's help in India for sure, was a very big deal for us. And for the trans women to be able to travel to Venice and paint there, live there, meet other artists, it took a lot of perseverance and pushing, but in a very subtle way because, as I said, I am cis and I'm very aware of my space within my organization itself. I am usually not the face of it. I don't like talking about my organization without the presence of my team members, because this was maybe founded by me, but it was for them. And I think I'm very aware of that. And at any occasion, without their presence, I do not do any work as well, if it is related to our 1 year project. It's taken a lot of effort, backhand, for the transformer to be able to develop that self-respect and understand that they hold a value in the society, regardless of their background and their gender and their class, because all three matters in the art world for some reason. And it was a difficult path to actually think about, but together it didn't feel so difficult.
Thank you for sharing that.
So I have the last say.
Yeah.
So we have done several, I'm based in Delhi, by the way, so next to the seat of power. So we get a lot of opportunities. So one such opportunity was doing the branding for Ayushman Bharat. Ayushman Bharat, very briefly, is health centers across the whole of India and the remotest villages possible. And there are about 1,50,000 health centers. So we were told to brand it. कुछ अच्छा बनाओ ताकि सबको पसंद आए. क्यों पसंद आना चाहिए? Sorry, why should everybody like it? So that they come to health centers. So people at village level don't go to health centers because they don't trust it, and they have their own medicines or own methods to solve their health problems, right? And so there's a lot of neonatal deaths, women dying of pregnancy, early childbirth, etc., all those things. So, and government very casually said that Prime Minister is inaugurating it after 15 days. That's 15 days we got. And तो आप कुछ जल्दी बना दीजिए, 3-4 concept बता दीजिए, and then PM office approve करेगा. So it was a big challenge. We did 3 concepts, and according to me, all of them were bad. Did not solve the problem. They were pretty things. So that's the other issue, that design is perceived as pretty things, beautiful things, right? So while it's an incorrect definition of design, I can keep shouting, but the world is not going to convert on that. So, however, I got this something which I call now, literally, a toilet idea, because there was a weekend in between. By the time I had to go and present to the health minister, Mr. Nadda. And I cracked the idea, and I presented it to him. So the idea was nothing but creating a system where at a village level, a local artisan can create a design with infusion of their local understanding of what their art is. And it becomes an Ayushman Bharat branding, Ayushman Bharat branding. So, and each health center, almost 80-90% of them are different, because some artists locally have done something there. We just gave them a few guidelines of how to do it. And we were not worried about, hey, what will happen to branding, like Uber wants to brand all its things across the world in a certain manner, right? So that people perceive it. I said this villager doesn't go more than 5 kilometers outside his village or her village, for most of their lifetime. So it doesn't matter. That is their health center. That's their brand for the health center, right? So, and it worked miraculously. So what we did was we just gave a brand manual, which was really said that KC dabba banao, make it. And because no 2 health centers were the same, each building was different, right? So you couldn't make a system, a template which could be applied like the way you do in UI UX. So now, and then the miracle started happening, because we started seeing this on the internet. People started posting pictures, and we saw. So if you go to our website, you will see this whole range of differentiated branding, as we put it, which is coming from the people. So it's down up. And I said the center doesn't have to worry, because everybody now associates themselves with that health center. So they locally they would say, hey, hamara Raju ne banaya. There is no Lopez design in the picture in that sense, right? So I think these are ways, and I think, so again, we spoke about thin slicing. So today, technology, and you guys are all tech people, will allow us to thin slice to the last person in the near future. So you'll be able to serve somebody, Salesforce can do that, to the last person they're delivering to, or serving, or problem solving for, right, in that sense. And I think, so it's about us, about how do we use the technology. So there will be the people who will misuse technology, and that's what we have done. All innovations have been used. are meant for good, but they have been misused, right? But I think it can do greater good in context to the new technologies which are emerging, which are parallel technologies, not only AI by itself, but everything else happening parallelly. It's going to create many solutions to the problems we never had solutions for, because very tough. They're called wicked problems, right? And we'll be able to solve, and not only solve, but also improve upon them on a systematic manner, right? So constantly, what's it called? Agile methods, right? So the whole world will be in an agile mode of transformation at a rapid pace, very fast.
Okay. With this, we sort of come to an end. I think a lot of beautiful stories. Maybe the idea of involving people in the process of design is what will lead to inclusive design. And thank you all for sharing your stories. And thank you everyone for listening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ashish.